Today's presentation has a lot of hyperlinks in it. So I know that sometimes people have a little bit of a hard time seeing the screen, but particularly with the hyperlinks, we're going to make sure that people have access to the slides today. I got this QR code to work with a little bit of fussing with my phone. On the last slide, I've got a really huge one, and so you can access that later if you need it. But you've all registered to attend this event, so I automatically send you an email with a link to the video and the slides anyway. So you don't need to take pictures of the slides or anything like that. And like I said, I'll share the hyperlinks with you. The topic of our presentation today is productive summer programs to improve applications and prepare for university. To start off with, I just want to make sure sort of what this session is and isn't. There are a bunch of things that are in here. I will try to be as transparent as possible about my own personal knowledge about these events and services and things like that. So please don't think of this as a curated list of these are the best places for your child, and if you're going to do something this summer, this is what they should do. Instead, I want you to kind of think of it more of sort of a conceptual exploration of sort of what is in the marketplace, sort of what are some of the different types of things that are available, and then also for us to be maybe redefining what we think is a good activity. Okay? The other warning that I have is I want people to be very mindful that programs stressing their affiliation with specific target universities sometimes can be predatory. So Oxford is a city. There's other words that are associated with universities like Crimson and things like that that are not trademarkable terms. And so there's a lot of organizations that will run summer programs where they have, you know, words like Oxford or Crimson or things like that in their title, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're affiliated with those institutions. Also see that in terms of some of these summer programs, they will merely rent space at particular universities. And so again, they're not affiliated. Students may be staying at the dorm at a very name brand university, or they may be attending classes in that space, but it's actually not being facilitated by the university, and it's not necessarily explicitly endorsed by the university. There's some other similar products on the market that I would also advise you to be a little bit wary of, which is current students at those universities or alumni from those universities are running sort of special events or sessions where they're giving you the inside tips, the inside knowledge about those organizations. It's not that you shouldn't do any of those things. I just want you to be careful in your investigation and your research about those things. There's no tricks. There's no sort of inside knowledge. There's no secret word that you can put in your application that's going to help you get in or anything like that. Other thing is that some of these things are really expensive. Some of the programs that I was looking at when I was getting ready for this presentation were £12,000 for 2 weeks. And I think that you would find it difficult to justify that necessarily in terms of a return on investment. So I definitely would say that more expensive is not necessarily better. I'd also say that for some of the institutions, they're actually providing free events. And in many cases, arguably, those free things are better. There's a bunch of things that you personally can do that are free, but some of the really selective universities, you apply to get onto a course or something like that, and then if you get accepted onto the course, you don't pay anything. You know, maybe you would pay for like room and board or food or something like that. Obviously, you pay for transportation, but you wouldn't actually pay for the course that you were taking because they've identified you as a student that they kind of want to recruit or something like that. And so you participating in their summer program is a way to help sell you on their school. The other thing that I would advise you about is some of these courses that are facilitated by these elite schools or are associated with these elite schools, you will get a grade on an assignment that you do with those in those programs, which I think I do think that's a good thing. I think that that's a valuable piece of evidence that you can include in your application, but I don't want to oversell the impact of that. So I had a student who took 2 courses at Cornell in a special like summer program at Cornell, and they got A's on both of their courses, and they did not get accepted to Cornell when they applied in the fall. I had another student who got onto a selective program that was co-facilitated by MIT and Caltech, where they were doing like astrophysics stuff and like tracking an asteroid or something like that. Did very well in the course, did not get accepted to MIT. So, doing these types of things they don't open a secret door. They're not magic bullets. Doing any specialized summer programs, it's not something that's going to guarantee anything. So just sort of be aware of that. All right, these are some of the big concepts that I want to talk about. And I think that these are relatively universal because, again, in a West Island context, we need to be talking about stuff with the mindset that our students are applying to universities in up to 12 countries, maybe more in a given year. My presentation is going to have a little bit of an American bias in terms of the programs that I know more about, frequently are more associated with the US. But again, I want to talk about it through a conceptual lens. So when I talk about those things, you can say, okay, I'm going to go look in other markets for sort of similar products. So I've tried to get more examples of things from some other countries. I have some in my presentation, but in some cases I know a little bit less about them. But these are big concepts that I would say would be universal. All right, so the first one would be, you might be sending your child on a very expensive summer program. You might be thinking about that as an investment. There are some big ideas that I would say are pretty universal in the admissions world right now, and this is true in basically all of the countries that our kids are looking at. One idea is the idea of pay to play, okay? And the idea is that a child gets to have a really interesting or amazing experience, but the reason they get to have that is that you paid for it, right? So I don't know, you have a family connection or something like that. You pay for them to get to go on a special trip. You pay for them to get to have some sort of special, really unique experience. It's not that that will hurt their application, but to a certain extent, they're saying you had access to that because of your family's financial means. And so we want to a certain extent, sort of moderate the influence of that experience on our decision, because we want to be thinking about other students who haven't had the same access as you. And you'll see this in a variety of different ways. For example, in the UK, we talk about contextual offers, which means that, for example, a young person who maybe is going to a school that has a lot less resources, they might get a lower offer for admissions. Maybe they need to get 34 points, whereas a WIS student might need to get 36 points because our kids have had access to a lot more opportunities. So some of those things, particularly when we're spending a lot of money, be cautious about that, because to a certain extent, universities in some cases will just say, okay, that's really cool, but they had that cool opportunity because their parents had paid for them to have that opportunity. And so it doesn't put as much of a weight on the scale. Again, similar idea would be the idea that kids have access to an opportunity because of the privileges that are associated with their families. So if your child, gets to have an internship at a really famous law firm, or gets to have an internship, with, someone in a really prestigious situation, it's not really that opportunity that's going to end up having a very big impact on their application. It really is going to be about these next two ideas, impact and insight, that are going to be important. Because if your child gets to have an internship in the Supreme Court as a 16-year-old, that probably just says to the university, it doesn't say that that child is necessarily particularly special. It says that the families have the capacity to organize them to have that type of opportunity. And so, again, it's not a bad thing. If you have the connections to be able to make something happen like that, I wouldn't say I would discourage you from doing it, but don't think that because you have a letter of reference from a very famous person or something like that, that it necessarily is going to have a big impact on the application. The two ideas that we keep on talking about, particularly with our students when they're writing their personal statements and essays, is the idea of impact and insight. And so we want to be thinking about that when we're thinking about our summer experiences as well. Impact works in two ways. Impact is the idea of when you had that experience, how did it impact you? How did you change as a person? Another idea is how did you affect other people, right? So if you did some sort of service experience, can you talk about in an essay, can you talk about in an interview how your service genuinely impacted other people, right? If I am on a service trip and I go to a school and I paint a wall at the school, what is my impact? Not very much. If I go do a beach cleanup, what is my impact? Not very much. There's going to be plastic on the beach again tomorrow, right? So the students who are having more powerful experiences, they might be able to genuinely talk about how through their experience, through the work that they did, they really did actually affect other people's lives and help them in some way. You could still do something like a beach cleanup and talk about the impact on you. I went and I spent 8 hours cleaning the beach. I filled up 10 garbage bags full of rubbish. My back was sore, my hands were scraped up. I felt a huge sense of accomplishment. I went back tomorrow and it was disgusting again. And what did I learn from that? And how do I think about the world differently, right? Other one that sort of relates to that, that's adjacent, is that idea of insight, right? And insight is the concept that as a result of having this experience, you have some sort of new knowledge about the world around you. You have some new knowledge about that domain. You have new knowledge about yourself that you didn't have before. And so when we're looking at the essays or the personal statements, you will see that universities want to see this impact and this insight. The other thing that I want to have a reminder is it's called summer vacation or summer break. And so it does need to be a vacation and it needs to be a break. If your child is doing things over the summer to sort of help their CV or whatever, that's fine, that's good. And maybe you do want to do some things that are business-like. Maybe you do want to use that time to do an SAT test prep course or something like that, which everyone knows is not very fun. But we definitely need to also find time for them to rest, relax, spend time with their loved ones, get energized. That's not just sort of like warm and fuzzy stuff. That's also frankly strategic. That if they come back into school and they're exhausted because they had such an over-programmed summer experience, then they're not going to perform as well next year in school. And similarly, our brains need rest. And so if they've been using their brain in this really intensive way, their capacity for insight, their capacity for creativity, et cetera, is going to be diminished, right? So we do want them to be kids. We want them to go spend time with their friends. We want them to do things that are going to be, energizing and fun too. All right. This is pretty cool. So there's a big organization for universities. The mother organization for that is called NACAC. And NACAC is this organization that frankly oversees basically everything that's happening with college admissions in the United States. And they have sub-chapters of that are specific to either states or regions depending upon population density. So there's like a chapter of NACAC that's for California or for New York. Okay? There's also a chapter of NACAC that's for international communities. And with this organization, they work both with university counselors and they also work with universities. So for example, I was lucky to go to the IACAC conference this summer. I was in Canada for that. And so it was a mixture of about, probably 500 people who are university admissions reps and probably about maybe 800 people who are university counselors, and we had professional development and networking opportunities. This is a really cool report that the NACAC puts out. I think it's about maybe once a year, once every couple years. and it's called the State of College Admissions. And so they have surveyed 185 sort of reputable universities. And for this survey, this would be US universities. And they've asked them about these different variables in terms of what they think is considerable importance, moderate importance, limited importance, and no importance. There's a couple of things that jump out to me that I wanted to sort of highlight with this that I think relates to our general strategy. Okay, so first off, in the United States, in terms of post-secondary organizations that are offering educational experiences, community colleges, universities, colleges, et cetera, we're talking about having about 5,300 different institutions. So when we talk about a good school or a selective school, I think sometimes we can get confused. If a child gets accepted into a top 100 university, that means that their university is in the top 2% of all universities in the United States. And I think that's a refreshing way to look at that. So these schools that, you know, it's only ranked 85th, well, that is in the top 2% of all universities in the United States. And so it is probably going to be a very good school. What we will see, though, is that with these 185 schools that have responded, it's a mixture of different types of schools. And so some of these schools are highly selective schools, and some of these schools are not highly selective schools. So as a consequence of that, you see that they're responding in different ways. So, for example, for the essay, you see that it's 20% of the schools say it's of considerable importance. That 20% is going to be the most selective schools, right? Whereas if you're applying to community college, you probably don't have an essay. If you're applying to a school that has a 85% acceptance rate, they may not look at your essay at all, right? But we see that when we combine those two, that gets us close to 60% are going to say it's of considerable or moderate importance. Extracurricular activities, again, you're going to see that that shows up, that 6.5, what that means is we're starting to get into probably the elite schools where that really makes a difference. Interview, most schools, almost all schools don't have an interview. And so again, interview, we're talking about very, 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 very selective schools. And then the lowest one that is work. Now, work is going to be something that I think some of our families think, oh, you know, that's maybe not something that has much value. But I think I would argue, based upon my conversations with universities, that even a job at Starbucks or a job at, you know, at a restaurant as a waitress or something like that, that can actually add a lot of value to an application because it means that you have had real life experience. Particularly in communities like ours, sometimes kids are surrounded by people who are paid to be nice to them. Whereas if you're working in a restaurant or something like that, you're going to have to interact and do problem solving and deal with difficult situations. And you're going to interact with the general population in a different way. So there's a lot that you can learn there, and it requires responsibility, discipline, communication skills. So there can be value with that. This one is something that people haven't been talking about for a while, and now it really is coming onto the scene, and I want to really highlight it for our families and also have that feed into what we're thinking about in general for our university applications. Positive character attributes, we've got 28.3 for considerable importance and 37.5 for moderate importance. So this is something that they're saying is more important than the SAT. This is more important than your essay. This is more important than your interview. This is more important than your work. One thing that I do want to note, at the bottom, it says subject test scores AP/IB. That doesn't relate to us. In the United States, for whatever reason, you are not required to submit your scores for AP or IB. And in the US, you do not get conditional admissions. You would apply with your report card, and then your IB or AP scores relate to whether you get college credit or not. That's not true for international schools. So if they did this survey differently with international schools in mind, you would see that your final IB scores would go higher up on that list. Okay. The other thing I wanted to just highlight is This is for the US, and I would say that if we were to have a similar survey in the UK, it would look differently. So when we're looking at non-US countries, there's definitely more of an emphasis, first and foremost, on do you have the academic preparation to be successful on the course? So that in most of the other non-US countries is going to be something like, I don't know, 90% of the decision factor. To a lesser extent, but somewhat still important, would be, do you have the sort of characteristics or personality type to be successful on the course or to be successful in that career? One slight exception to that, I would say, would be medicine. So when we have references for medicine in the UK, or when students write their personal statement for the UK, they definitely need to provide evidence of the fact that they are a person who shows care for other human beings and that they have an extended amount of experience working in contexts where they're working with people who need either sort of health care or other types of support and things like that. So if you were going to do like a medical application, that shouldn't be just exclusively about how good you're at science. You need to find space in your essay and your references to talk about how you care about other people and how you've demonstrated that through internships and volunteering, et cetera. All right, so this is a list. Excuse me. All right, this is going great. Thank you. So this is a list I got from the Berkeley Wellbeing Institute of positive character attributes, and they've divided it into 3 different categories. So positive interpersonal traits, so kindness, leadership, consideration, empathy, reliability. Positive intellectual traits, intelligent, innovative, thoughtful, conscientious, effective. Positive emotional traits, resilient, brave, calm, optimistic, and humorous. These are things, particularly for a US application, that we want to have become visible. And so those CAS experiences and these summer experiences can be ways to demonstrate that you have these characteristics and or to show that you are doing work to develop them. One of my favorite anecdotes that I think is just a really great piece of evidence for a reference was for one of my students who's in year 13 this year. That student was running a club where they were crocheting like hats and stuff like that, and I think they distribute them to like people who are poor or homeless or something like that. And the student was teaching younger people how to crochet, and one of the young students who was learning was left-handed, and so they were having a hard time figuring out to do it because they needed to do sort of a mirror image of what she was doing and everything. And so she went home that night and she taught herself how to crochet left-handed, and then when she came back, she was able to teach the student how to crochet because she could demonstrate left-handed. So I think that that's like this great little piece of evidence that can end up in a letter of reference in terms of things like empathy and being thoughtful. That's the sort of little nugget that a university, that's going to give them a really vivid sense of who that young person is. And that's a type of person you want to spend more time with. That's the type of person who you think is going to go out and make the world a better place. So we just talked about that. All right, so first off, some of the stuff that I'm going to share is going to be expensive. So I wanted to start off with the fact that you don't need to spend any money. These are some things that are all free or very, very close to free. So there are MOOCs, which are massive open online courses that are available through Coursera. You can either go directly to the Coursera platform or you can find these MOOCs on Unifrog. The edX platform is MIT's platform, and they also have a bunch of courses that are on there. For the MOOCs, they're on any topic that you could possibly imagine, and some of them get into very advanced content as well. Most of them will allow you to do the course for free. So that's great. In some cases, if you want to get a certificate of completion or a grade, then you need to do some sort of final assessment. And so in that case, you might have to pay like a small fee. So I think I've never heard of anything more than $25 US to sort of do the assessment to get a certificate or get a grade to say that you completed it. There's some really cool courses on there. If a student were to do that again, I would say do things that you're genuinely interested in. I'd also say maybe do things that are a bit more niche. Don't do like introduction to X. I think it would be more interesting if you did something where it was sort of more specific. But if you want to do introduction, that's fine. Other stuff in the world of work, there's job shadowing, interning, volunteering, getting a job in a related field or getting a job in an unrelated field. So like I said, getting a job as a waitress or a waiter, getting a job in a Starbucks, that's fine. And you can use that effectively as part of your application. That's okay. Sometimes you can also get jobs that are related to what you want to do. So if you can get paid for something that you want to do, that's great. That's fine. So like for a kid maybe who wants to do something with graphic design, they could probably potentially already get a job doing gig work or something like that. With that, someone who wants to work with animals, maybe they could get a job in a veterinary clinic or a dog grooming place or an animal shelter or something like that. Hypothetically, that type of stuff is possible. So that's great. That's nice. In terms of interning and job shadowing, active is always better. So if you do a job shadow, that's nice. You certainly can get some insight out of that in terms of, oh my God, I didn't know how hard doctors worked, or I didn't know how busy these people were, or all that sort of stuff. That's great. Generally speaking, in terms of the impact on your application, the more active you are, the more you personally get to do, the better that's going to affect your application. So that leads us to the third one, which is volunteering. And I think in a lot of cases, sort of that idea of volunteering, that can create, in some ways, the best opportunities. So if you're volunteering with an NGO or something like that, they maybe don't have the big budgets, of a major law office or something like that. So as a result of that, they see that you're a smart, capable kid. They're probably going to give you a little bit more responsibility. So there's some good opportunities there. Other thing is just reading books and periodicals. This 100% is something that would be considered a super curricular in terms of our UK-style applications. Many of our students, when they write their personal statement, they will talk about specific articles or specific books that they've read that have had a major impact on their thinking about economics or thinking about public health or something like that. So reading is great. If you're doing the US application and you are a voracious reader, you could absolutely put reading as one of your activities on the Common App. So like my daughter is a really big reader, and last year she read over 100 books. So that's something that's a bit interesting. That's something maybe that's a bit unusual, right? Another thing is we have a list that's been curated of super curricular reading. So Dr. Yu has put that together, so there's a link in there for you if you want. It's books that your child might read, and it's organized by topic. So it's like some recommended readings for things that relate maybe to biology or physics or chemistry or economics. So it might be journal articles or it might be books and things like that. Podcasts are great. I talk to students about podcasts all the time. I have a long commute, and so I listen to podcasts because sometimes it takes me about an hour and a half to get home at night. And so it's a productive thing to do. A lot of them are really interesting. There are podcasts literally about everything now, and there's a bunch of them that are really high quality. Most of them tend to be free. I know that some of them are paid now, so like The Economist has some podcasts that are behind a paywall, but most of them are free. The other thing is you can watch high quality video content, so there's amazing documentaries, there's amazing films. YouTube is like the real world. It's a mixture of everything. So there's tons of garbage on YouTube, but there is also really, really excellent high-end content. There's Harvard lectures, there's Oxford lectures, there's content producers who are creating really, really high-level excellent stuff. So you need to sort of be careful and look, but there's definitely great stuff. And the other side of that is that students can also start their own blog or their own vlog. So I've talked about this in a previous session, but it's a great way to show some agency. It's a great way to show that you are interested in something. So I had a previous student at my old school who blogged about politics, and that student has been doing that since they were in probably about year 10 or 11. That was part of their university application to UC Berkeley, where they attended to study political science. Now they're doing a PhD in political science at University of Michigan. So that doesn't cost anything. I've also seen students do that in terms of like sort of more artistic things, like architecture or something like that, where, you know, Hong Kong is a really beautiful city. You're interested in architecture. You walk around the city, you find buildings that you think are interesting. You take a picture of it. You put it up on your blog. You write a little article about who the architect was, what the style is, who their influences were, stuff like that. You can start a business. So, I mean, you can do that at sort of whatever level of officialness that you want to do. But it's pretty easy to start a business even legally here in Hong Kong. And so, again, that's a great way to have a bunch of experiences that you can talk about in an internship, or excuse me, in an interview or in a personal statement. For people who are heading in the direction of like computer science or like engineering or those types of things, I think taking courses and all of that is great, but I think doing stuff is even better. So, you know, can you build something? I'm from America, so I'd say, can you build something in your garage? I don't think too many of you have garages probably, but, you know, as a coder, can you make an application? Can you make something good enough that you can put it on the Google Play Store and people will actually download your app? Can you build something? I think in a previous session I talked about one of my students who in Thailand cooperated with one of the royal organizations that was supporting people who were amputees. We had some problems like landmines and things like that with some of the areas that were near Cambodia. And so this student downloaded open source stuff and was basically 3D printing devices for people who had lost their hands and things like that. And so you can do stuff like that. So whatever your imagination is, you can build stuff. My son is doing something. My son is 12 years old, and he's doing something right now that I think is really cool that would be a good example of this too. I don't know why. He's gotten into reptiles. So he's decided that he wants to breed a type of gecko. And he's decided that he wants to, he has these cages that are called bioactive. So they're like self-sustaining. So he's got like bugs that are in there that like recycle stuff and turn the waste from the gecko into like fertilizer and everything. And so he's doing all this stuff and he's doing all of this research into like, what do I need to do to have the cage be like comfortable for the gecko? He's telling me about like, oh, I can't breed the geckos yet because the female doesn't weigh this many grams and I need to get her weight up to this point. And so he's doing all of this research on all of this stuff. I don't know anything about it. But he's showing agency. He was talking to me about homogeneous and heterogeneous like genes and stuff, and about like how he wanted to breed the geckos for like different characteristics. And like he bought these 2 geckos because they had these color patterns, and so there was like an X% chance that he would have you know, a gecko that would be this color, and he can sell those geckos for a lot of money or something, right? So that's like a legitimate thing to be doing, and he is talking about science content that he hasn't learned about in school, and he's showing that he's a creative and curious person. You can also conduct your research. There's some great opportunities that I'm going to talk about where you can formally partner with a professor or something like that to conduct research. But you don't have to do that. You can conduct research on your own, regardless of what your discipline is. And so that's something that you can add. Okay, on to the stuff that's going to be expensive. All right, so this one is not necessarily expensive, but this is just a really basic thing, and I think this is one of those ones for sure that's kind of on a conceptual level. If you have target universities, or if you're going to be going home over the summer and there is a university that's relatively near where you're going to be staying, this is really easy, and you will get a pretty definitive answer pretty quickly. Just Google University X and then pre-college summer program. That would work really well for the United States. Outside of the United States, I might say University X pre-university summer program. If you do that, then you will find out whether that school has a program, and many of those universities that you're going to be looking at will have those programs. I would say this is probably most popular in the United States, but in Hong Kong, almost all the major universities have some sort of pre-university program. In the UK, it's a bit more of a mixed bag, but they definitely have them. Some things to note, I had a student who did some pre-university programs in the Netherlands, so they're in other countries as well. But some things to note is that not all universities or age levels have residential option for participating students. So like for this university here, this is the University of Wisconsin. They have kids staying in the dorms if they do their like sort of pre-university courses, but the kids who are in the dorms have to be, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16 years old. They have other programs for younger children, but those would be day programs. So, you know, you drop your kid off in the morning and you pick them up in the afternoon. The other thing to be aware of is that for some of these programs, they're only available for domestic students. So if you had the passport and you're like staying with your parents over the summer or something like that, I think you'd probably be okay. But in some cases, like I've seen programs in the UK, et cetera, that it says that it's not available to international students. In terms of the deadlines for these, when I've been able to find stuff, I've tried to sort of share it, but I ran out of time, so I don't have it for everything, and in some cases it wasn't really clear. The more competitive programs have applications as early as December. That's the earliest that I've seen. And then some of them will go all the way to May or June even. So it really does depend. Other thing is, for the university programs, some of them are selective. So you'll have to write an essay, you'll have to get letters of references, you'll have to submit transcripts, and then there are other ones that are not selective at all. So that's something to be aware of, and also, you know, do your research about in terms of whether you're going to be able to get into that, and making sure that you have lead time to get everything you need to support your application. All right, so this is what I was talking about before. This is for the UK. Excuse me. So there's a third-party vendor. Actually, I guess it'd be a fourth-party vendor. It says, these are the best summer programs for Oxford. And so there's SBC, Immerse, something Royal Academy, Bucksmore, a couple different providers. So there's 4 or 5 different providers that are all running summer programs at Oxford over the summer. This one here is $12,225 US for 25 days, which I'm not paying that much money. Maybe you have more money than me. The other ones are 7,000 pounds, 2,500 pounds. So there is a range, but as we talked at the start, you need to think about what your budget is, and I definitely would not say, oh, if you do that one that's 12,000, you've got a better chance of getting into Oxford. So do your homework, and as I said, you don't necessarily need to pay for stuff. King's College, they run their own program, so the application system and everything is all housed on the King's College site, and everything is run by King's College. Warwick has a program also that they run themselves. Me personally, I'm a little bit more comfortable with that. I think probably some of those third-party vendors do have good programs. There's no reason why they wouldn't. But I think probably the universities are more likely to want to protect their brand and more likely to want to try to keep costs down. So that's just my own personal bias. But another one that we have, which I think is quite cool, is Bath. They have an international summer program. And what's cool about theirs is if you have a certain level of performance, then they actually guarantee you'll get a conditional offer, which is a cool thing. So that's maybe worth checking out. I was talking to some students yesterday, so this is a little bit limited. These students were doing their IAs for biology, so these are 2 science ones. But there's the Cambridge Center for International Research, and then there's the FitzEd program, which is associated with the Fitzwilliam College in Cambridge. The Cambridge Center for International Research, it's my understanding that that was an online research mentorship program. The student that we had did it. I think they virtually presented to a audience at King's College, not King's College London, but King's College Oxford. They said they thought it was very good. The FitzEd one, I think, is more directly affiliated with Fitzwilliam College, which is a college at Cambridge. They have a variety of different courses that you can do, and that one was on-site. You stay in the Fitzwilliam College housing and use their facilities. There's a bunch of other cool things. So maybe your child is interested in learning a foreign language. The one at the top I can speak to personally. When I was a little kid, I went to Lac du Bois, which is Lake in the Woods. So all of the Concordia language villages, Concordia is associated with, there's a university in Minnesota, and they have a big emphasis on like people learning languages and things like that. So they run these summer programs, and all of the summer programs will translate to Lake in the Woods because Minnesota is very famous for its 10,000 lakes. So it's basically just a traditional summer camp with the twist, which is it's done via language immersion. So I don't know why I was studying French, but I studied French. And so, we would have traditional summer camp stuff in terms of like canoeing and swimming and playing sports and shooting bows and arrows and stuff like that. But we would have like French food in the canteen, and we would do cultural type stuff. And then during certain parts of the day, we were supposed to only speak French, try to only speak French. The year after that, I went on a really cool trip with them where in that part of the United States, there was a big French influence in terms of fur traders and things like that. And so for a week, we did a camping trip where we canoed from location to location and sort of imagined we were like French fur traders, basically. So for our students, the languages we offer at WIS, I believe, are Chinese, French, and Spanish, but they also have like Arabic and Finnish and a bunch of other languages as well. So I did that, you can imagine, a long time ago. But when I did it, I thought it was fun and it was good. I would say it's not great for older kids. I would say maybe like upper middle school, lower high school. I don't think a kid who's in year 12 probably would dig it that much. Registration closes for that in May, but with all this stuff, I would try to do it a bit earlier. The other thing is you can go to certain countries and do intensive language programs. So for me, the one that I know the most about is Salamanca in Spain. They have these intensive places where you can do sort of language study at like a language academy, and some of the kids will stay in a dormitory, but one of the other options is to do a homestay, which could be really cool in terms of having that cultural experience of living with a Spanish family for a couple weeks while you're taking Spanish. So I'm sure that there are other options for that where you could do the same thing in France or something like that. But the one that I know about is Salamanca. That's pretty famous for that. These would be non-selective. For outdoor adventures, Outward Bound and National Outdoor Leadership School are two really famous programs out of the United States. They both have international trips that are available. If your child is, I don't remember the name of it, we have something in Hong Kong that's the equivalent of the Duke of Edinburgh Award. But it's a different name here in Hong Kong. You would do camping and service and stuff like that. Anyways, the person who designed that system is associated with both of these systems as well. His name is Kurt Hahn. And so basically they have different types of trips where you would do backpacking, you would do river rafting, you do mountain climbing, and other things like that. I think that they're really incredible opportunities to sort of develop a sense of personal responsibility, self-confidence, leadership, resilient skills. My brother and I both were very lucky that we got to do trips with this. We both did it when we were in university, but they have younger age groups as well. So my brother, he did Denali, which is Mount McKinley up in Alaska. So he did ice climbing, and he did hiking around on glaciers, and he did a bunch of stuff on Mount McKinley. I went to Kenya, and so I spent, I think 3 weeks there. We climbed Mount Kenya. We did the second highest peak in Kenya. So we spent 2 or 3 weeks backpacking there. We spent a week in the Masai Mara, backpacking across the Masai Mara where the Maasai people are. And then we spent some time on the Lamu Archipelago, sailing traditional Arab sailboats. And then we finished with a safari. For me, that experience was really transformative. The level of personal responsibility I had for myself was something that I hadn't experienced before, in terms of I was responsible for setting up my tent correctly, and if I didn't, when it rained, I was going to get wet. I was responsible for packing my backpack correctly. If it didn't, I was going to have a sore back. The way that those programs typically work is you go to an environment and you have your teachers, and they teach you how to navigate, and they teach you the skill, and you move together at the same time. And then a couple days later, they will have you go by yourself, but they'll be, an hour behind you. Then a couple days later, they will not meet with you until the end of the day. And then a couple days later, then you go out on a solo exhibition, where you're out for 5 days by yourself or whatever. So we needed to make really adult decisions. And in our group, we ran out of food. So we needed to ration our food for the last 2 days and stuff like that.
So it's not this is something necessarily that everybody would want to do. But for me, it was like really transformative. And I think that I had a lot more personal confidence about what I was capable. You know, climbing that mountain at 3 o'clock in the morning where we were above, we were in the dead zone, you know, where you can't live because there's not enough air and everything like that. And I was huffing and puffing. To have that sense of accomplishment and to sort of do this thing that I thought was really hard was something that was really powerful for me. These are two programs that are really famous in the US, and they're a little bit different than the sort of the summer school type stuff. The Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth has been around for a really long time. That's a selective program that you need to qualify to get into, and you can qualify into it as a younger student. They have online resources and online courses and things like that. They also have face-to-face campuses. It looks like they have a face-to-face campus in Hong Kong that you can do through HKU, but they also have campuses across the United States if you're in the US for some reason. They also have like online courses and other things like that. So that one's got a very good reputation. We have students for sure at West Island who are doing stuff with the Center for Talented Youth. One of the students I'm helping this year in Youth Year 13 has done stuff through them. Another one that's pretty cool, and I would think this would be a product that would be available in other countries. The New York Times is obviously probably the most famous newspaper out of the United States. They have a summer academy for teenagers who want to become journalists. I looked, and the South China Morning Post also has some enrichment programs and things like that. I would think that in the UK, probably some newspapers or other countries might have similar things. One of the programs that I was going to tell you about, which was really famous, is Duke Tip, but apparently it's been closed, so it didn't survive COVID, and it doesn't exist. And they have summer enrichment programs, but it's sort of been enveloped into their other programs, and they don't have that talent identification program anymore. Another topic of some interest to some of our families is sports camps. So definitely across the United States and in Europe, they have sports camps. And that can be just because your child likes sports and they want to get better. That would be me. As a kid, I went to ice hockey camp and I went to football camp, soccer camp. And my aspirations were to be a college athlete, then I guess I was delusional at that time. So it's about like having fun, and it's about getting exercise and improving your skills. I think it's another great way for kids to get a bit more independent and have some maturity in terms of spending the week with people they've never met before and sort of having to negotiate all of that. If your child is an elite athlete, they have these things called ID camps, which are basic talent identification camps. We have been using the resources of NCSA to help our sort of most talented athletes. They have services that I've spoken about before that are paid and free. And so some of it can be expensive, but basically they have a list and they will say, oh, like there's a special event that's being hosted at this location or that location. And either it would be the university itself hosting it, or it might be something where multiple universities come together to see. And so, for something like basketball, they would maybe see how tall you are and see how long your arms are and see how fast you can run and see how high you can jump, maybe how much weight you can lift. And then also see you scrimmaging and things like that. So those are some opportunities as well. This is one that's not really associated with a specific university that we have students participating. Don't think we've had anyone do the camps, but we have students every year who will write the John Locke essay competition. So this is all social science type stuff. They will have a list of essay questions in different social science fields like economics or political science or history, and you can write these essays. You register for the essay on May 31st, and then the essay's due by June 30th. Probably had about 5 kids do this last year. But they also have summer programs. This is a selective program that you have to apply to get onto. And so they host those campuses at Oxford, Princeton, and Georgetown. They also have something that I thought looked really cool, which is they have a gap year program, which is in Washington, D.C. So obviously that's the United States capital. And so this would be people who would be interested in international relations, global politics, stuff like that. And they have a gap year experience that you can do there where you're like literally interacting with senators and lobbyists and stuff like that. So that looks pretty cool. We also have a bunch of arts ones. Berkeley is a really famous school in, I think, the Boston area. This is not the Berkeley in California. They've got face-to-face or online music performance, music production, songwriting and composition, music business and dance and theater programs. Most of these ones are non-selective, and it says the early bird registration for that is January 31st. Juilliard is a eye-wateringly expensive, very good performing arts school in the New York City area. They also have programs. Theirs is selective to get into, so you have to audition and send off like videos of you doing stuff to get onto that course. That one is the applications you need to be, I think, either done with or started by December. One of the things that's cool about the Juilliard one, if you get onto that, is there's sort of like a career counseling thing. So if you're the best singer or the best dancer at West Island School, you're a little bit of a big fish in a small pond. Whereas if you go to this event, they know what the best talent in the world looks like, and they can sort of give you a realistic projection in terms of whether you're going to be able to dance ballet at the Paris Opera or something like that. These ones I don't know anything about, but they were recommended. So I was trying to get some more non-US stuff and just other things in general. So I reached out to our arts department. These are ones that are recommended by people like Ms. Cunliffe, Ms. Delgado, Ms. Rochester. So there's the National Youth Theater. They have selective and non-selective options. There's the National Youth Dance Company. There's something called Frantic Assembly that does a lot of different types of things in performing arts. And then there's the Leeds Conservatoire, which is associated with the Leeds Conservatoire, and that would be more music stuff. We also have arts programs here in Hong Kong. So we've got the Hong Kong Ballet Academy. Babel Film Workshop is really cool if kids are interested in film. They got a bunch of sort of more technical courses where you could sort of like learn a specific skill set. And then they also have this more extended workshop that goes on for an extended period of time where you make a film and you go through all of the processes. So Ms. Aroni really likes them. When we had our career fair last year, we invited one of the people who represents Babel to come in and speak. The Hong Kong Ballet Academy is obviously ballet, and then the shift dance is more contemporary dance. These ones are some of the ones that we promote amongst our students. These are all here in Hong Kong. Many of these are free. So that's great. So there's the University of Hong Kong Academy for the Talented. That kind of functions like that Johns Hopkins program that I was talking about. So there's an annual application cycle. And so the application cycle closes on November 10th, and students have to submit like some documentation and references and some other stuff like that, I think, to get onto that program. Once you get onto that program, then you have access to sort of like different courses and lectures that they do. They also facilitate some special programs over the summer. HKUST has a program. Usually there's applications are due in April. Most of these websites are not up to date right now, so they have the old content for the 2024 summer. So the information I'm giving you here is this is what it was due last year. I mentioned the South China Morning Post. They have sort of a division called Learn, and they do different types of workshops. I think that they have specialized summer programs. Right now, they've removed their old content, and they only have like courses and things that you can sign up for right now. There's another one that's called the HKFYG Leadership Institute. That looked kind of interesting. Chinese University of Hong Kong also has a summer program for the gifted and talented. The applications for that is due May, and that one is definitely selective. One of the ones that we really like, and I know that we have a family in the room who participate in this, is the Hong Kong Polytechnic University Junior Researcher Mentor Program. And so what happens with that is members of the faculty from PolyU they come up with some sort of project that they think would be good or that they're working on, and then students apply in term 3, and they say one or more of those projects that they'd like to work on, and then there's a selection process, and then depending upon the nature of the work, they might take on a couple, or I don't know, but different projects have different number of students that are working on them. I can't remember all the projects. I remember one of our boys who graduated last year, he did one that was really cool where he was interested in robotics. And so they were working on a robot, and it was about fighting fires, I guess I'd say. And so they were doing like computer coding, and the robot puffed out a vortex of air, which basically suffocated the fire. Really, really interesting. The thing that's cool about the PolyU one is it's not specifically STEM. So they definitely have things that are for psychology. They have things for like business and economics. There's a huge range. It was helping kids with applications previous year, and I think there was like maybe like 40 different projects that they could think about. So there's a really good variety. The other thing that's really cool with that is one of my students this year started work with the PolyU professor. They got on really, really well, and then they continued work on beyond the formal project. That is really great because it shows that it's authentic and it's not something that your mom and dad forced you to do. And also it can feed into maybe that professor writing a letter of reference or something like that. The student talked about their research, I think it was for their Columbia application, and so because they want to verify that what the student is talking about for that specific application platform, they've requested the contact details of the mentor for that. So we've got those details, and it sounds like they're going to either write them an email or sort of like make a phone call to them to sort of verify what the nature of that work was. Another one that I think is really cool is the Justice Center. Now this one's a little bit expensive, but basically this is a one for people who want to be lawyers. And so it's like a special summer boot camp and learning about what it is to be a lawyer, and it's looking at some sort of justice issues here in Hong Kong. I do think that one is a little bit expensive. A lot of the other ones that are up here are free, and free is good. All right, so my final reminders, this was a long one today, is remember, it's not really about what you did or which institution you did it through. It's about how you're able to talk about how is important to you. So how were you impacted by the experience? How did you impact others through the experience? And then this one is really critical, is what unique insights have you gained through the experience about yourself, the topic, or the larger world? So a lot of our kids do something called Sunshine Action Committee, where they're doing some really great work, where they're working with people who are homeless here in Hong Kong. But you can't have your insight be, it's difficult to be homeless. That's not a unique insight, right? So we need to have kids really doing some deeper reflection on that stuff for it to be valuable for the application. We want to also think about what advanced knowledge skills or conceptual understanding did you gain through the experience. So again, if your service activity is painting a wall, you're not really developing advanced knowledge or skills. What positive character attributes did you develop or demonstrate through the experience? And then, really importantly, how well can you articulate this growth via a personal statement, essay, or interview? If you just list it and say, I had an internship, they'll say, oh, that's nice, but it doesn't really add any value to your application, all right? That was verbose today. I went the whole hour, I'm sorry. So I'm gonna stop, and I'm going to let busy people who have been patiently waiting for me to finish, you can excuse yourself if you want. I'll stay, I think, at the bottom, and then if people have questions, you can talk to me on the way out the door. So thank you for your patience. I'm sorry that you listened to me speak that long.